Hello everybody, welcome to What Culture. I'm Scott, joined by Ewan.
Hello.
And we thought there is a big old thing we're going to get to in regards to Mr. Kylo Ren himself having some background detail that is all new, but we also thought we would roll together a couple of additional theories because why not just talk about some Star Wars stuff? So let's open on the Kylo Ren thing. There's a comic coming.
Yes, so it was announced the other month that Charles Soule is actually working on a brand new Star Wars comic for Marvel that is going to detail the rise of Kylo Ren. Back, we've really only had like brief glimpses of what Ben Solo was like during Luke's training, how he was like with Han and Leia beforehand. And there's a brand new comic called Star Wars: The Rise of Kylo Ren, and there was a solicitation that was released. This is a thing that Marvel and DC do all the time, when they basically spoil their own comics, which is quite cool. And there's a whole thing going on, and the cover by Clayton Crane actually involves Luke and Ben. Ben as a Padawan, actually facing the Knights of Ren in an kind of outer rim territory.
Yeah.
And that's a really fascinating image. It has, Ben with his classic blue lightsaber, Luke's there kind of guarding him, and you've got all the Knights of Ren flanking them. There's one that actually has a lightsaber as well. We've not actually seen Knights of Ren with a lightsaber before. And I think this is really interesting because it falls into the whole information that we've got in recent months, where we've learned, originally it was most heavily speculated that Kylo Ren really kind of created that name, and the Knights of Ren belonged to Kylo. And while we know that they're still servant to him, at least judging from what we've seen from the visual dictionary so far, it definitely seems as though Kylo modeled his own aesthetic on that group of people, and that the answer to Snoke or someone else, which we'll get to later, rather than to him specifically. And the actual issue itself looks really cool. I'll read out the synopsis very, very quickly. So,
I must theorise on the Ren, but I will get back to it.
With the new Jedi school in ruins and fellow students hot on his trail for the murder of their master, Ben Solo flees to the only friend he has left in the galaxy, a man named Snoke. But Snoke has plans for Ben and ideas about the Force that are as dangerous as they are intriguing for the troubled young Jedi. If Ben wishes to be truly free, the answers might lie with the dark side and with the Knights of Ren. But it won't be the first time he's tangled with the Knights. In the past, Jedi Master Luke Skywalker journeys to the unknown regions, different to the Outer Rim, I should clarify that, and brings young Ben along for the mission. Can even Luke Skywalker stand against the fabled Knights of Ren? The fabled Knights of Ren.
So we need to address the fact that back in Force Awakens, when we had Rey's flashback Force Vision thing, it was all the Knights of Ren standing behind Kylo, and that just seemed to be that they were like this elite squad that clearly were very good with a different variety of weapons, but that was all that we saw back then. They were barely mentioned in The Last Jedi, other than Snoke saying Master of the Knights of Ren to Kylo. But this whole thing, like you said, assumes that the actual Knights of Ren predate Kylo altogether, and they've been this active force in the galaxy. Plus, like you said, in the new visual dictionary that's coming out with Episode 9, it describes them as being a bunch of different races that all come together. It seems that you have an elite warrior per race that all unite, making the Knights of Ren, which is way more fascinating than anything that we got before.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, again, the initial thing that you take away from that is that maybe the Knights of Ren were other students that Kylo had corrupted, but, the idea that they're actually a fabled group of people that go back years before. And I think the idea of fabled forces lends weight to a historic cult in that way, and I would be interested in seeing whether or not this was kind of Snoke's own unit, or whether or not the Knights of Ren actually stem back to the days of the Empire, and maybe their kind of cult is around Palpatine, especially going in to the Rise of Skywalker. The interesting link here, though, is that Luke and Ben go to the unknown regions, and that's where the Knights of Ren are. And we know for a fact that in the Aftermath trilogy of books by Chuck Wendig, we know that the Emperor actually made a point of exploring the unknown regions, and maybe, that's where the fleet is in Rise of Skywalker, the old Imperial Ghost fleet, and it's all, at least to me,
coming together.
It's all building towards something that Palpatine maybe has had this long-term contingency plan that's been, basically playing the ultimate definition of the long game, and maybe that falls into the Knights of Ren, maybe that falls into the fleet that's been out in the unknown regions as well. It's all very interesting.
If you're going to wrap a whole lot of stuff around to the original movies as well, a lot of stuff that JJ's talked about is going back to original ideas. He said that at one point there was something that Lucas was going to do that he's been able to bring back for Episode 9, and so maybe they are just going to pick at some old threads and go, look, these things were in motion the whole time, and make it feel a lot more connected or whatever. In terms of Kylo as well, that thing that you said about he's searching for answers and he ends up with Snoke, that's what Leia obviously says in Force Awakens, that it wasn't us as parents with Han, it was Snoke who corrupted him and whatever. And it seems like he's more of they're kind of doubling down on the whole lost child thing with Kylo that he has in The Last Jedi. That's why I love Kylo, because he is just so misguided. He tries things, he tries to fit in with Snoke, kills his dad, hoping that it's going to make it work, and it still doesn't. If they see this even more in the comic, then if they do end up going with the redemption arc at the end of episode 9, mirroring the end of episode 6, then it kind of would make quote-unquote more sense, because he's always been lost.
This comic comes out in January, so we'll know what happens by the time, you know, it releases, and that maybe will put the events of, you know, the Rise of Skywalker into further context. The first issue does, however, release before the film comes out. I think it comes out December 12th.
Yes.
So, yeah, interesting stuff there.
I like the idea of, even like you said, the visuals. I like the idea of Kylo and Luke going on a whole bunch of missions, because the way that it kind of gets painted in Last Jedi, I assumed that Luke, like, you know, it was the very beginning of his training where he sensed something dark in Kylo, but I like that they actually had more of a partnership, and there's more to that sort of relationship, and like, you know, it even recontextualizes or gives more weight to the way that Luke eventually says, "See you around, kid," at the end of Last Jedi, because they always had that sort of father-son thing going on.
Yeah.
Like, in a way, it can, you know, repower some of those other scenes in the old movies.
Yeah, but how do you think about the Knights of Ren specifically? I've gotten my own personal pet theory now, is that I think in Rise of Skywalker, we're going to see like a three-pronged conflict. We're going to have the whole reveal that maybe Kylo doesn't have actual ownership over the Knights of Ren anymore. They've been off doing their own thing, potentially in relation to the Emperor's, you know, ostensible grand scheme, and that's where you get the old fleet coming in. I'm really curious to see, because one of the things that I really like from Star Wars is when they really explore into new aspects of the lore. I think the idea of there being unknown regions in the galaxy that the Emperor was obsessed with exploring is really, really fascinating.
Plus, in terms of canon, like in Star Wars Battlefront 2, you have the whole thing where post Palpatine dying, he did set in motion all these. I mean, it's been explored in various different novels and stuff. But in Battlefront 2, it was like, well, he had this whole other Scorched Earth program or whatever protocol, where there's all these like hologram versions of him that live inside droids that go and enact his will. So he's clearly had like a future plan for a while.
A little thing on Battlefront 2 in that game, I think the story's actually well worth playing. It's a little bit cliched in parts, but I do think if you're looking to explore that post Return of the Jedi kind of time frame, I think it's really interesting. And basically what the Empire do, I think it's Operation Cinder or something, where they basically, in a bid to scorch the Earth and where the rebels are actually taking over, they basically start massacring their own planets to basically enact a whole, you know, mythology of being, we can't rebel because the Empire will literally destroy all our planets. And it's a similar way to the Death Star, but on a different scale. And I would be interested to see if maybe that wasn't the Emperor's last gambit, and maybe there was something else to it. And I'm curious to see how this all goes in, because I think one of the most fascinating things about the new trilogy is the idea of legacy, and looking into how legacy can be interpreted for the better or for worse. Obviously, you think of one aspect of Anakin Skywalker is that he was a horrible person that turned to the dark side and did loads of nasty things, but he was redeemed at the end. And obviously, Ben Solo takes the wrong message from that, and it's like, well, Anakin, you didn't go too far enough.
I would be super interested to see if they can roll it back around, because the whole let the past die, kill it if you have to, whatever. If you can isolate that to the way that Kylo wrongly thinks about the way that you're supposed to learn from the mistakes of the past or whatever, roll that all around to be like, no, you're actually supposed to deal with your past and learn from it. And overall, you know, that would tie in with the way that the marketing's kind of shifted, where they're embracing Star Wars past to go forward like as one kind of thing with the, you know, the way the fandom is. But yeah, I mean, in terms of the stuff that's out there, it seems like they're, like I said, setting things up for more of a redemptive arc on Kylo's side.
I do think it's worth pointing out the artifacts as well, and the idea of legacy, because in the most recent Rise of Skywalker trailer, we did a reaction over that earlier in the week. You do see that one brief shot of Rey and Kylo smashing some sort of artifact, and then before that you have Rey running through the jungles. I don't know what planet it is. It could be Yavin 4, it could be something else, but you see her running and she's got like a red artifact in her hand. And then later in that sequence where they destroy the, I don't know what it is, the trailer literally cuts the moment after.
Like you would see like enough of a helmet.
Yeah.
I'm gonna, just for the sake of betting, I'm gonna say it's Kylo. I think he's just destroying his old image, but it almost makes more sense for it to be Vader. And I know a lot of people think that it's in the room where he looks at the helmet from Force Awakens, so it would be some weird like connected force vision with Rey and Kylo where Vader turns up and they both destroy this version of Vader. So maybe.
Yeah, I think my own personal theory on regards to Kylo's arc going forward into the Rise of Skywalker and where we'll see this comic that we mentioned earlier on, I think one of the most interesting things here is that you have a comic that is literally about the rise of Kylo Ren and the fall of Ben Solo. I'm really interested to see how the Rise of Skywalker will put that comic into context, because if he doesn't redeem himself in that final film, it will just literally be the tragic arc of Ben Solo, how he basically got corrupted by the dark side. But if he is redeeming himself and there is some sort of sacrifice involved, that'll make that entire last arc feel a little bit more poignant. And I'm kind of personally hoping for an idea where, you know, we subvert our expectations and Ben doesn't actually ever get redeemed, because I think that is interesting in itself. But I do think it's interesting that we could put that into context from what we could gather from Ben's overall arc.
Yeah, man. I think in terms of, like I said, the amount of things that they've sort of mirrored in the other movies, for me, it makes thematic sense or whatever, or like, you know, the wishes of George Lucas in terms of how much he's talks about the movies rhyming and stuff, that I just see a scene where Kylo dies to save everybody else, and dies the same way Vader did. In this time round, it'll be Rey's arms or whatever, going forward. But yeah, let us know what you think down in the comments below of the potential for Kylo being redeemed and the idea that he was a good old boy hanging out with old man Luke when they were being father and a son combo back in the day. For now, though, I've been Scott from WhatCulture.com.
I've been Ewan from WhatCulture.com.
I will catch you next time.
Bye. If you want to talk about Droopy McCool,
Oh, every time.
he smells like vanilla.